Imagine walking into a room filled with laughter, only to realize that the joy is built upon your pain. The very people you once trusted, the ones who knew your scars, your history, your vulnerability, turned your wounds into their trophies. They didn't just hurt you, no, they elevated that hurt into something theatrical, something to be admired by the crowd. They wore their betrayal like a crown, polished it with self-righteousness, and displayed it like art. What was sacred to you, your trust, your innocence, your love, was reduced to an anecdote in someone else's proud story. And there you stood, watching it all unfold in silence, unable to scream, unable to run, frozen not by fear, but by the sheer disbelief that those you would have bled for had offered you as a sacrifice instead. Is there any pain more profound than betrayal dressed as celebration? Is there any wound deeper than the one inflicted by those who smile while they hurt you? The world has a way of rewarding pride when it walks confidently, even if that confidence is built upon cruelty. But there is one who does not judge as man judges. There is one who sees the heart when all the world applauds the surface. God does not confuse boldness with righteousness. He does not mistake decorum for decency. And when he moves, he does not tear down gently. He uproots the pride of the arrogant from its very foundation. God sees what they did. He saw the secret meetings, the whispers behind closed doors, the laughter at your expense. He witnessed the twisting of truth into tales, your silence painted as guilt, and your grace misinterpreted as weakness. And though heaven remained quiet for a season, it was never blind. What they built with arrogance, God is preparing to strip with justice. This is not merely about revenge or vengeance. It is about righteousness. God is not a spectator in the theater of your pain. He is the author of justice, the defender of the meek, and the destroyer of false altars erected in pride. You were not foolish for trusting. You were faithful. You were not weak for loving. You were pure. And when they turned your light into a source of mockery, they didn't just offend you. They provoked the holiness of God. For when the innocent are targeted and their pain becomes a parade for the proud, heaven prepares to intervene. It begins slowly. The praise they once received starts to sound hollow. The crowd that once cheered begins to thin. Life has a divine rhythm, and God has perfect timing. The very decorations they once flaunted, the lies, the manipulation, the false image, will become their undoing. What was once a symbol of pride will be the banner of their fall. Let us be honest. Sometimes it hurts more when the world celebrates those who broke us. When their social media glows with applause and their stories remain unchallenged. When no one sees the truth behind the smiles and you're left carrying the burden of what actually happened. But you must remember, God's silence is not God's consent. His delay is not his denial. He allows the proud to rise not to reward them, but to position them for a public humbling. Just as they raised the knife and then lifted their heads in self-exaltation, so too will God lift his hand, not in anger, but in holiness. And that which was once exalted will be exposed. That which was admired will be abandoned. That which was beautiful in deception will be made ugly by truth. You don't need to seek revenge. You don't need to retaliate. Your only assignment is to remain pure, to remain silent when silence is strength, and to keep walking forward even when your past is used as someone else's platform. Because in due time, what they built with pride, God will tear apart with truth. And it will be glorious. For now, the stage is theirs. Let them perform. Let them wear their costume. Let them bask in applause. But remember, every performance has an end, and when the curtains fall, only truth remains standing. You, beloved, were not the fool. You were the seed buried deep, and God is about to bring forth a harvest that no mocking voice can silence. And while they may wear your pain as their medal, remember that what man elevates in ignorance, God will humble in wisdom. Their applause may echo now, but time is a careful examiner. It sees what flattery conceals, and in time the image they constructed with such effort will no longer hold against the weight of divine truth. What was built to impress will collapse under the scrutiny of the eternal, because God, unlike man, is not deceived by appearances. He is not moved by status or blinded by charisma. He measures the soul, not the mask. You may be tempted to cry out, to scream your story into the void in hopes that someone will finally hear, finally understand what you endured in silence. But do not give your pain away for cheap validation. Let it remain in the hands of God, for He knows how to wield it rightly. You see, when God chooses to vindicate, He does not whisper. He makes a statement that cannot be denied. And when He chooses to humble the proud, He does so not with cruelty, but with precision. He allows them to be undone by their own pride, so that the lesson is not just corrective, but undeniable. Often the proud continue in their deception because no one has dared to confront them. The silence of others becomes their permission. They assume they've won, that they've outsmarted consequences, but that assumption is the first seed of their unraveling. Pride feeds on the illusion of invincibility, and God, who is never in a hurry, is always setting the perfect stage for its fall. One by one, the layers they wrap themselves in will be stripped away, not by human hands, but by the divine order of truth. And as that process unfolds, you will be tempted to watch it like a spectator at a theater, but that is not your place. Your place is to keep your eyes fixed not on their downfall, but on your own healing. Do not allow bitterness to grow roots where restoration should bloom. Let your pain be sanctified, not weaponized, because while they mocked your fall, God is using it as the very soil to plant your rise. The path of the righteous is rarely praised in the moment. It is the lonely road, the quiet one, the one where you wake up with questions and sleep with tears. But it is also the road most watched by heaven. God takes note of every insult that wasn't deserved, every lie that was swallowed in silence, every betrayal that was endured without retaliation. These are not forgotten moments, they are sacred records. Even now, God is crafting justice, not the kind that mirrors man's limited definition, but a justice so perfect, so undeniable, that it restores without revenge and exalts without ego. The hands that were used to wound you will tremble when faced with what they've done. Not because you pointed a finger, but because truth in its purest form confronts with more force than accusation ever could. They decorated their treachery with stories. They made themselves look wise by making you look weak. And in doing so, they did not just distort your name, they attempted to distort what is sacred. They tried to rewrite the narrative with themselves as the hero and you as the mistake. But the author of all stories does not yield his pen to deceivers. He allows their chapters to unfold just long enough for the truth to be undeniable in the climax. So do not despair when your pain is misunderstood. Do not crumble when their lies are applauded. God is not asleep. His justice is not delayed. It is designed. Designed to be full, not rushed. Designed to expose, not just punish. And when it comes, it will be so complete that you won't need to explain yourself. The very people who questioned your story will see it with their own eyes. And you will be silent, not because you are weak, but because peace no longer requires a voice to defend it. This is the peculiar strength God gives to those who have suffered quietly. He grants them peace while he wages the war they were too gentle to fight. He prepares a table for them, not in the absence of their enemies, but in their presence, not to gloat, but to restore what was taken, your name, your peace, your dignity. He restores them all, not just in the eyes of heaven, but in the very places where you were mocked. The decoration they built will become their shame. The platform they stood on will become their fall. And in that moment, they will remember everything. Every word, every silence they misused, every heart they bruised. And you, once ignored, will be remembered not for your retaliation, but for your restraint. That is where God shines brightest, in the hearts of those who chose righteousness over revenge, healing over hatred, and humility over pride. You are not forgotten. You are being prepared. You are being prepared not just for healing, but for elevation. And in this sacred process, God does something extraordinary. He transforms your story from a testimony of hurt into a declaration of His sovereignty. What was once used to break you will become the very material used to build the next stage of your life. Not a life haunted by the past, but a life rising from it, untouched by its bitterness, refined by its fire. Let us consider the divine paradox, that those who rejoice in causing pain often do so loudly, but the restoration of the wounded is crafted in silence. God does not announce His workings like men do. He does not need applause or attention. His justice is so complete that by the time it manifests, there's no need for interpretation. The truth will be undeniable, not because it is shouted. You may wonder, why did God allow them to decorate their cruelty in the first place? Why permit the mockery? Why the delay? But understand this. If God responded immediately to every injustice, He would also interrupt the deeper lesson being formed in you. The waiting, the watching, the quiet wrestling in your soul. It has not been in vain. Through it, you've gained something your oppressors never will. Character built on truth, a soul trained by trust, and a spirit that refuses to be defined by bitterness. They, on the other hand, were building castles in the air, structures made of image and illusion. Every lie they crafted was a brick laid in a house that cannot withstand the winds of God's justice. When that storm comes, and it will not be the Lao who remain standing, but the rooted, those whose foundation was truth, not showmanship, those who endured in silence while others performed in arrogance. What they celebrated will become a spectacle of sorrow. What they thought was strength will be seen as show, because pride cannot last where humility is rising, and in the spiritual realm there is no confusion. God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. The arc of His justice may bend slowly, but it never bends in vain. It bends toward revelation, toward restoration, toward reckoning. And as that reckoning unfolds, you will begin to feel something stir inside you. Not vengeance, but freedom. Not anger, but release. Because when God vindicates you, He does not just fix the past, He redefines your future. The places you were once ashamed to enter will become the grounds of your testimony. The conversations that once crushed your spirit will become reminders of how far you've risen, not because you fought for your place, but because God lifted you to it. Yes, they hurt you and called it righteousness. They wounded you and wrapped it in confidence. They told others it was necessary, that you deserved it, that you were the one who lost your way. But what they didn't realize was that every step they took away from truth was a step into a trap of their own making. God allowed them to walk far, not to give them power, but to give them enough rope to expose the condition of their heart. They thought silence meant approval. They mistook your stillness for surrender. But you were not abandoned. You were being watched over. Every tear you shed in private was seen. Every night you wrestled with why this happened and whether anyone would believe you. Those cries reached heaven, and heaven did not ignore them. Heaven stored them. What they did to you wasn't just an offense against you. It was an offense against God's creation, against the one He calls beloved. And what God calls beloved, He does not leave unprotected. He may permit the pain for a season, but only if He plans to use it for a purpose greater than you can imagine. What they turned into a moment of pride will become, in God's hands, the moment of their greatest humbling. You will not need to speak for yourself, because God will speak for you. He will tear down the decoration they used to disguise their evil and reveal the truth with such clarity that no explanation will be required. And in that moment, the room that once laughed will grow silent. The audience that once clapped will question, and the pride that once paraded will dissolve into the dust it was built upon. Do not fear this unfolding. Do not rush it. God's timing is not delayed, it is deliberate, and when He moves, He restores with precision. The same eyes that witnessed your humiliation will witness your rise. The same voices that echoed lies will fall silent in awe. And you, once pushed to the shadows, will walk freely in the light, not because you fought your way forward, but because God carried you there. You see, when God carries someone out of the valley, He does not merely lift them to level ground. He raises them to higher ground. And this rising is not theatrical. It is not loud. It is not built on applause. It is slow, dignified, deliberate, a kind of rising that cannot be denied because it is too deeply rooted to be shaken. And what makes it powerful is that it does not depend on tearing others down. Your elevation will not require the collapse of others. It will simply reveal the truth of who you are. That's the contrast between their pride and your purity. They rose by stepping on others. You are rising by being carried by God. They constructed a narrative to justify their actions. You trusted the author of truth to write your vindication. And while the world may have cheered their act, heaven never mistook it for righteousness. God does not judge on appearances. He judges the heart. He sees the hand behind the mask. He discerns the thought behind the word. He weighs motives as much as actions. And that's why His justice is often terrifying in its thoroughness. He does not punish randomly. He reveals deliberately. He exposes the cracks in the foundation of the proud with such precision that no one can claim misunderstanding. When God humbles, He leaves no room for confusion. Those who hurt you and called it discipline, those who mocked you and labeled it honesty, those who used your vulnerability to paint themselves as strong, they were not strong. They were afraid. Afraid of truth, afraid of exposure, afraid of your light. Because your light reminded them of what they buried in themselves, and so they did the only thing the insecure can do. They attacked what they couldn't control and dressed it as virtue. But light cannot be extinguished by shadow. It may be hidden for a time, but it will find a way to shine again. And your light, dear one, is not just returning. It is being refined. Because everything they took, everything they tarnished, God is not only restoring, He is purifying. What once hurt will become holy. What once crushed you will become your crown. Do not envy their moment of applause. Do not resent their brief celebration. Because what is built on pride never lasts, and what is built on deception always decays. It is only a matter of time before the truth begins to erode their image, and when it does, they will realize that in hurting you, they also harm themselves. In silencing you, they deafen themselves to wisdom. In mocking your fall, they laughed at the very grace that could have saved them. There is something sacred about suffering quietly. It teaches you to listen in the silence. It helps you hear the voice of God when no one else is speaking truth. It strips away the false dependencies, the distractions, the noise. And it reveals to you that your worth was never in their approval. Your identity was never rooted in their opinion. You were always more than their version of you. And once you grasp that, everything changes. You no longer need their validation because God's confirmation is louder. You no longer need their applause because peace is now your reward. You no longer tremble at their stories because your truth is rising with strength. And this strength is not loud or boastful. It's the kind of strength that doesn't need to speak to be felt. It's the quiet confidence that knows who it belongs to. It's the certainty that comes from walking through fire and realizing you are still whole. When God tears down the decoration they built around their betrayal, He will not just expose them. He will vindicate you. He will show the truth not only to the world but also to you, so that you no longer carry the weight of wondering if it was all in your head, so that you no longer question your own memory, your own heart, your own value. That clarity will heal places no apology ever could. And that is the brilliance of divine justice. It doesn't merely balance the scales, it rewrites the entire story. It restores what was stolen. It purifies what was corrupted. It builds where others destroyed. And in the end it leaves no doubt who was truly righteous. So walk forward, not in fear, not in vengeance, but in faith. The God who saw it all is also the God who will make it right. And His restoration doesn't just bring you back to where you were. It takes you where you were always meant to be. Not in their shadow, not beneath their judgment, but standing tall in the light of who you truly are. There comes a moment in every divinely authored story when the silent chapters give way to revelation. You have walked through shadows. You have stood alone in rooms filled with noise, none of it speaking the truth. You have been judged not by your actions, but by the stories others told about you. And worst of all, those stories were told by people who knew better, people who knew your heart, your struggles, your sincerity. But they twisted your name like a thread in their performance, shaping a narrative that fit their pride, not the truth. They didn't just hurt you. They put your suffering on display and called it righteousness. They made ornaments from your tears and wore them as badges of superiority. In public, they claimed wisdom and discernment. In private, they knew the truth and still chose the lie. And they walked confidently in their delusion, believing no one saw the difference. But someone did. God was there in the moments you doubted your own goodness. He was present when you wrestled with the fear that maybe they were right, maybe you really were too much, too broken, too wrong. But in those very moments, God was anchoring you, not in their opinions, but in His truth. He was preparing you not just for vindication, but for transformation. And now the soil they cursed you in has begun to break open. The seed they thought they buried is rising, not in vengeance, but in power. And as you rise, God is revealing the architecture of their deceit. Not in your timing, not through your hands, but in His divine unfolding. One thread at a time, He is pulling apart the tapestry they wove from your pain. What they thought was a masterpiece of manipulation is being undone by the hand of heaven. They will not fall because you spoke up. They will fall because truth does not stay hidden forever. Their lies will rot under the light of God's justice. Their smirks will fade into silence, and the platform they use to elevate themselves will become the very altar on which they will meet humility. But again, you must not let bitterness guide your steps. God did not bring you this far to make you a mirror of their pride. He lifted you to become a vessel of peace, a witness to His justice, a story of redemption. That is your strength. Not that you were never hurt, but that you were hurt and still chose purity. You could have exposed them. You could have fought back, screamed your truth and demanded the world believe you, but you chose the narrow path. You chose to be still and let God speak louder, and now He will. Not in noise, but in consequence. Not in wrath, but in undeniable clarity. Their reward will be the crumbling of their own illusion. Their punishment will be the loss of trust they once held so tightly. And they will watch as the very people they manipulated begin to see the truth. Not because you corrected the record, but because truth has its own voice, a voice far more powerful than any rumor or reputation. And when that moment comes, do not lower yourself to match their pride. Do not laugh when they fall or celebrate their humiliation. That is not your place. Your place is at peace. Your role is to keep rising, not over them, but above the noise. You are not the character they wrote. You are the story God is still telling. So keep walking. Keep trusting. Keep your hands clean and your hearts soft, because everything they did to stain your name will one day be used by God to shine His glory. They decorated their betrayal with pride, but God is tearing that decoration apart, and He's doing it with purpose, not just to expose them, but to elevate you. You never needed to prove your worth to those who found comfort in your suffering. Your silence, which they mistook as weakness, was actually your greatest strength. It held back the flood of bitterness that would have made you just like them. They made a show of your pain, but you chose to protect your soul. That choice was never small. It was sacred, and heaven took note. Now, something holy is shifting. The very things they used to elevate themselves, the twisted narratives, the feigned righteousness, the smug superiority, are beginning to collapse beneath the weight of their own falsehoods. Not all at once, not in some thunderous downfall, but piece by piece, quietly, thoroughly. God's justice doesn't shout. It doesn't need to. It simply arrives with precision. And when it does, nothing remains hidden. They will look around and wonder why the room that once applauded has grown silent. They will reach for the admiration they once fed on and find it missing. Because the admiration of the world is fickle, and when truth arrives, it always changes the temperature. People begin to see differently. They remember details they once ignored. They replay moments with new awareness. And slowly, the illusion unravels. And you'll feel it in the stillness. A sense of release you can't explain. A quiet inner knowing that God has stepped in, that the burden you once carried is no longer yours to hold, that the judgment which once followed you has shifted directions, not because you sought revenge, but because righteousness always finishes what it starts. God will not just expose what they did, He will extract it from the narrative they built. He will reach into the places where your name was spoken falsely and rewrite the truth where it matters most. Not in the gossip circles or the court of public opinion, but in the hearts of those who matter. In the spaces where your reputation suffered in silence, God will send clarity like a slow sunrise, illuminating the corners where shadows once ruled. And in that light, everything will look different. Not because you changed it, but because truth has a way of changing everything it touches. And the truth about you, the real you, is that you survived what should have broken you. You endured what most would have crumbled under. You stood quietly while others danced on your wounds. And still, you chose goodness. You chose it even when it felt like a losing battle. You chose it when no one thanked you. You chose it when the world looked the other way. That choice, over and over, has positioned you for something they can never take: divine favor. It does not come from being seen by men, it comes from being known by God. And once He lifts you, there is no accusation, no story, no prideful decoration strong enough to pull you back down. This is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of the part where God restores what was mocked, rebuilds what was broken, and rewrites what was twisted. He is not just dismantling the pride that wounded you. He is reconstructing your life in such a way that even your enemies will have to admit it was Him. So walk on, not as a victim, but as one chosen to carry grace where others carried pride, not with anger in your heart, but with peace in your stride, because the tables are turning, not out of malice, but out of justice. And when they do, you won't need to gloat. You'll simply know God kept His promise. And in that quiet, undeniable moment, when their decoration has turned to dust and your truth has turned to light, you'll realize the deepest victory isn't that they fell, it's that you never became like them.